les États-Unis ont accepté de réduire le niveau des droits de douane supplémentaires. Pour la Suisse, ces droits seront désormais plafonnés à 15%, ce qui, je l'ai dit, nous place sur un pied d'égalité avec l'Union européenne. Deuxièmement, les produits qui bénéficiaient déjà d'exemptions continueront d'en profiter. Cela concerne notamment les produits pharmaceutiques, certains produits chimiques, l'or et les semi-conducteurs.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. AJ Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and a senior economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. AJ, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how could this reduction of U.S. tariffs to 15% impact Swiss exports, trade balances, and also particularly in luxury goods and manufacturing? As we know, U.S. imports a lot of them from Switzerland or Swiss.
I think the impact would be very positive. The major exports of Switzerland to the United States had been watches, the luxury watches, pharmaceuticals, particularly branded ones, chocolates, and certain electronic products, as well as certain semiconductors, all of which were being imported in considerable volumes in the US, and the Swiss economy was being impacted by certain, one doesn't know what exactly were the reasons which irked the president of US against Switzerland when he adopted a different yardstick against Switzerland compared to the European Union. But now that he has relented, yes, the Swiss companies have had to agree to make a certain amount of investment. The figure being put is $200 billion over the next 3 years. Yes, the US, that might, as of now, be looking steep for a small country, but it is possible for the large Swiss conglomerates to be able to undertake such investment and they might be willing to do it because of the size of the US market and the fact that if President Trump or his successors were to again impose duties on imports from Switzerland, then they get hurt. So it might be better for them to undertake the investment by borrowing funds from the US financial institutions, stock markets, etc., and put the money there, making use of their technology and continue to cater to the US economy. So I think it's a good move. It gives President Trump also a face-saving device that he's been able to get a commitment of $200 billion of investment, which is large by all account, and will help him kind of pursue his MAGA, the Made in America, or Make America Great Again.
Right, and how do you think, what could be the potential macroeconomic effects of this rollback of tariffs have on U.S. consumers and domestic industries?
I don't think adverse impact would be significant because the U.S. industry, I don't think luxury watches were being made in the U.S. They were more of electronic, the middle order or the lower end products. The US had been importing these largely from Europe, and in which Switzerland had a place, pride of place. Similarly, the pharmaceuticals, the branded ones, we're not talking about the generics which come from, say, China, India, etc., but the real branded stuff, and for whether it's the climate of Switzerland for their manufacturing these drugs, or their ability to adhere to standards, etc. And that I must emphasize that the Swiss industry, in whatever it produces, it might be even handmade, certain products, they invariably adhere to very high quality standards. So it will help, I think, both the sides without an adverse impact upon anyone, helping the workers of the workers and the investors in Switzerland, and in the US, the consumer high-end consumer as well as the middle-end, the middle class, all would benefit from this. So a very positive macroeconomic effect.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. A.J. Dua, and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance states that U.S. President Donald Trump recognizes the need to negotiate with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, despite their differences. In an interview, Vance has added that he has heard people criticize Trump for talking to Putin, but also stated that it is necessary in order to bring peace. These statements from Vance comes as a meeting between Trump and Putin in Budapest, Hungary, was postponed earlier. Moscow and Washington stated that the meeting will take place when suitable conditions are created. Both leaders last met in mid-August in Alaska to discuss an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, looking at this, what do you think, what political factors would be influencing the timing and location of Trump-Putin meeting if it were to happen?
Well, I don't think it will happen very soon. There is no point. The meeting in Budapest was cancelled because at some point the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, basically repeated all these demands, and they are absolutely nonsense demands for the Ukrainian army to withdraw from the 4 regions, for sanctions to be lifted, and for the government in Ukraine to be replaced by a pro-Russian government. And all this, obviously Marco Rubio, after his correspondence with Lavrov, reported to Donald Trump that there is no point to meet because it will be absolutely useless meeting, and Trump will look very badly in the public opinion of the world if he meets again and nothing comes out of that meeting. Certainly after that, and there was some exchange of mutual threats. The Russians were talking about some renovating old system, Burevestnik, and to start some new testing of that old missile. Americans responded that we have much more weapons, you can do whatever you want to do, we are not scared. And later we see in Kremlin the language becoming a little bit more mild, and they kind of said, no, we didn't mean that, we want to continue negotiations. But obviously, these are like zigzagging messages from Washington and Moscow. And certainly it comes also what J.D. Vance is saying, that yes, we can continue some talks with Moscow, but there is no prospect here. Putin is not stopping killing civilians in Ukraine. For some meaningful negotiation, there should be a ceasefire first. And if Putin rejected 8, 9, 10 times, even a short-term 30-day ceasefire, there is really no point to talk to Putin. Again, I don't see this happening. So although Russians are now trying to please Trump, because this is the only thing left for Russia. Russia had no good news on the battlefield. Russia is suffering, its economy is collapsing, sanctions are working very well. Ukraine is hitting the oil refineries, and the biggest depot in Novorossiysk in the Black Sea has been hit by Ukrainian drones. Effectively 30, even more % of the Russian oil export is affected by Ukrainian drones. And these are always very, very bad news for Putin, bad news for Kremlin. And they still kind of pray for one last opportunity to talk to Trump and somehow to try to get something out of that talk. But even that is meaningless. Trump is not going to support Putin anymore. He realized how long time, 10 months already we are in this year, and absolutely zero achievement of all these attempts to negotiate with Putin, which means that there should be a time to stop even those attempts and move into a harsh language, into demand for ceasefire, more sanctions, more isolation of Vladimir Putin until he realizes that he's left alone in the world and nobody is supporting him, apart from North Korea maybe, but nobody else.
And Professor, do you think, as we know previously, Trump was very open about, his motive of pushing Putin into a ceasefire or coming into peace deal with Ukraine was getting a Nobel Peace Prize. But now, do you think his motive could be shifted towards upcoming election, as with the U.S. government shutdown and a lot of things going on in U.S., his popularity is going down?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Asuma. His priorities shift more towards the domestic audience. He faces a lot of elections. He faces a lot of other internal disbalances within the United States. So for him, Russia-Ukraine is left not even in the top 10 priorities anymore, which is, again, as I said, a very bad news for Russia, because they couldn't get anything out of Donald Trump, apart from language, apart from statements, apart from talk, but that talk is also empty. It doesn't give Russia any advantages. Yes, the priorities are shifting, and Trump will focus much more on the forthcoming elections next year. And but in the meantime, we see support on the law level, on the level of Marco Rubio, the foreign secretary. We see supportive messages that United States will continue sanctioning Russia and supporting Ukraine, which is probably at this point the maximum that Ukraine and Zelensky can achieve, to have somehow Europeans in a strong support, but Americans still behind that, at least not damaging the situation. Vladimir Putin wanted Trump to be on his side, and he achieved the opposite. Now Donald Trump is not only on the 0 point, but he's even in the negative for Russia point.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Popovsky for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next news as well. Now we stay on this topic. UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric has said that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemns large-scale missile and drone attacks by the Russia on several Ukrainian regions. This comes as Ukrainian officials have reported that Russia launched a heavy drone and missile attack on Ukraine early on November 14, killing 6 people in Kyiv and 2 more in the south by strikes on energy facilities, apartment buildings, and infrastructure. The spokesperson said that the UN chief has reiterated his call for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire as a first step towards sustainable peace in Ukraine. Let's listen into what the spokesperson has shared.
The Secretary General strongly condemns today's large-scale missile and drone attack by the Russian Federation on several Ukrainian regions, reportedly killing at least 6 people in Kyiv and 2 people in the city of Chormonorsk. The attack is also reported to have caused many injuries among civilians and damage to residential and energy infrastructure, as well as damage to the embassy of the Republic of Azerbaijan in Kyiv. Attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure violate international humanitarian law. They are unacceptable wherever they occur and must end immediately. The Secretary General recalls the principle also of the inviolability of diplomatic premises. The Secretary General reiterates his call for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire as a first step towards a just, comprehensive, and sustainable peace in Ukraine, one that fully upholds Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized border, in line with the United Nations Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Tyndall Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how could these developments, how are these influencing Western security assistance towards Ukraine, and especially as the conflict now expands beyond traditional front lines, also looking at Ukraine's recent use of long-range Neptune military missiles?
Yes, first of all, it's welcoming to see a statement from United Nations. Unfortunately, not very many such, but this time it's very clear that United Nations, the Secretary General of the United Nations, stands very firmly accusing Russia for those strikes that kill civilians and target buildings and hospitals and schools. And we see a lot of civilians being hit, a lot of civilians being injured, and that's obviously the task of the Secretary General is to speak for the victims of those violations of international humanitarian law, war crimes committed almost daily by Russia. And for that matter, yes, your question is about how to strengthen the air defense, and it is a serious issue. There are discussions to supply more systems. Patriot is a very strong system to help Ukraine to gun down most of the missiles and drones in order to protect its civilians in those big cities. So obviously Ukraine needs more such support, military equipment, air defense systems. And the Europeans are also very aware of that, and they are supplying Ukraine with those systems, but obviously they need to be always more, because it's a large territory. Ukraine is, in geography, it's almost half of Europe, continental Europe. So it's a large territory that needs to be protected from the Russian missiles and drones. That work will continue. It's good also to add to that the voice of the United Nations to make it more global and to continue that support, because otherwise, with the forthcoming winter, it will be a tough winter for many Ukrainians. They realize that, we realize that, and for that matter, there needs to be a united front in support of Ukraine, including military. Effectively, I would say everything that Ukraine needs in terms of military support, it should be given by the coalition of the will, all the Europeans, but also Americans, Canadians, Japanese, Australians, and everybody else who supports Ukraine with military. And there are many countries, actually. There are more than 50 countries that are supplying Ukraine with military assistance.
Yes, with that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, during the international jurists meeting in Caracas, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has delivered an anti-war message to the U.S., urging Washington to stop the insane hand that brings bombing, killing, and war to South America and the Caribbean. He has stressed the need to understanding growing threats in the Caribbean Sea from U.S. military actions. The remarks came as Washington announced Operation Southern Spear, targeting narco-terrorists in the region under U.S. Southern Command, which oversees military activity across 31 countries in South and Central America and the Caribbean. This is what Nicolas Maduro has shared.
Es el pueblo de Estados Unidos a quien me dirijo en este momento, frente a estos 100 juristas de 34 países, para decirle: paren la mano enloquecida de quien ordena bombardear, matar y llevar una guerra a Sudamérica, al Caribe. ¡Detengan la guerra! ¿Queremos otra Gaza ahora en Sudamérica? ¿Qué dice el pueblo de Estados Unidos? ¿Quieren una nueva Afganistán? ¿Quieren de nuevo Vietnam? ¿Quieren Libia otra vez? O lo que es peor, ¿quieren una nueva Gaza en Sudamérica? Déjeme decirle que no y que no. Y que aquí triunfará la paz, el derecho internacional.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump said that he had made up his mind on U.S. policy towards Venezuela, as his administration carried out strikes on alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean. Let's listen into what President Donald Trump has said.
I sort of have made up my mind, yeah. I mean, I can't tell you what it would be, but I sort of made up my mind.
What do you say to some of your supporters who might not be excited about another foreign campaign?
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, I can't tell you what it is, but we made a lot of progress with Venezuela in terms of stopping drugs from pouring in.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world. Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has said that he would likely sue the BBC next week for as much as $5 billion after the British broadcaster admitted it wrongly edited a video of a speech he gave but insisted there was no legal basis for his claim. US President Donald Trump has lifted tariffs on beef, coffee, and other agricultural products to stabilize prices and ease inflation. The move affects products like tomatoes, bananas, and cocoa, aligning with recent agreements with Ecuador, Argentina, and other countries. US President Donald Trump says China will buy US soybeans and other farm goods, adding that both sides held talks on 14th November. Trump expects purchases to begin before spring, though he did not identify which officials were involved in the discussions. The US and Switzerland have announced a new trade framework cutting US tariffs on Swiss goods from 39% to 15%, with Swiss firms pledging $200 billion in US investment by 2028. Finally, negotiations are expected by early 2026. US President Donald Trump again distanced himself from Jeffrey Epstein after newly released emails mentioned him. Trump said he knew nothing about Epstein, calling the claims a Democratic distraction and urging a probe into Epstein's ties with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and others instead. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says no Russian strike will go unpunished after deadly attacks on Kyiv and southern Ukraine. He praised long-range Neptune missiles and urged more air defense support from partners as civilian casualties continue to rise. 9 people were killed and 29 injured after a massive accidental blast at Naugam police station in Srinagar, India. The explosion occurred while forensic teams handled seized explosives linked to a terror module, leaving widespread damage and shockwaves felt kilometers away. The UN Security Council demands an end to Houthi rebel attacks in Yemen and strengthens monitoring of the arms embargo. Sanctions on Houthi leaders and the group are extended for a year to promote peace and regional security. Now Now we start with Trump and BBC. US President Donald Trump says that he would likely sue the BBC next week for as much as $5 billion after the British broadcaster admitted it wrongly edited a video of the speech he gave but insisted there was no legal basis for his claims. Trump's lawyers had initially set a Friday deadline for the BBC to retract its documentary or face a lawsuit for no less than $1 billion. They've also demanded an apology and compensation for what they called overwhelming reputational and financial harm. Trump has now said that he will sue the BBC for anywhere between $1 and $5 billion. Let's listen in.
We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take?
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated.
The BBC has admitted editing of Trump's remarks was an error of judgment and has sent a personal apology to Trump earlier this week. The broadcaster has stated that it would not rebroadcast the documentary, but has rejected the defamation claim. Meanwhile, Trump has also stated that he has not spoken with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer yet on this issue, but that he planned to call him this weekend. He has added Starmer had tried to reach him and was very embarrassed by the incident. Let's listen in.
I have not, but I'll call him. I'm going to call him over the weekend. He actually put a call into me. He's very embarrassed by it. You know, I don't know what percentage is owned by the country, but regardless if it's small or large or nothing, I can say this, the UK is very, very embarrassed by BBC, what they did.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Shruti, now looking at this, how does this multi-billion-dollar lawsuit by sitting U.S. president against a major foreign broadcaster affect the current U.S.-UK political and media relations? Do you think it has any effect, this personal connection or personal attack, not personal attack, but is taken as personal attack by BBC on Trump, could affect their ties?
Well, the probability of suit does kind of put a strain on the UK-USA relationship. But as of now, we've not seen the immediate knee-jerk reaction like we saw with Canada. I think that shows that Trump has learned his lesson, that if he kicks his allies left, right, and center for whatever assumed defamation that he feels or any slight of insult that he feels is coming his way, then it would end up USA very alone in their sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. So it shows that he is perturbed because he's talking about a lawsuit, but not enough because it's not going to be repeated. They have publicly admitted to editing it. There have been two people who have submitted BBC News head as well as their Director General of News. They both quit their jobs on this very same day, although they deny their leaving of their jobs as a direct consequence of being fired for this kind of travesty that has happened with Trump. But they've said it did play its role. So there have already been heads that have rolled for this kind of an action. It does not help UK's case. If Trump does set a lawsuit, he needs to do it. He has many legal problems that are going to come his way because it is a state broadcaster. It's a public service broadcaster. So in a way, he would be fighting the state of UK. So he would be fighting the government of UK in that particular stance. And so it's a good thing that he's hesitating and he's just made big calls about it, but he's not actually gone ahead and done it. This is not like the ABC News where he got his $1 billion settlement from, and this is not the other privatized news channels like the New York Times and the others that he has problems with. This is a state broadcaster, and if he has a problem with the state broadcaster and he takes a lawsuit, then he's actually fighting against the state of UK. That means the Prime Minister and his government. And that would put trade relationships on a pause, that would put a lot of strain on any kind of friendship or camaraderie between the two nations and not just two people. So this is, if he goes ahead with it, it might be a bigger problem than USA actually wants on its hands right now, because since the documentary is not going to be rebroadcasted, redistributed in any way or form, Trump has already lost the groundings that this is going to cause serious damage to it. It was broadcasted once and it has been repealed and the error admitted publicly. So I think he would let these sleeping dogs lie, and he's not going to make much of a fuss because it might end up ruining his friendship with Europe on a whole.
Right, the stakes are indeed very high. And Shruti, I also wanted to ask your take on BBC now. How might this BBC incident be leveraged domestically and also internationally to influence narratives about institutional trust, political bias, and role of public broadcasters? So what do you think will all this affect BBC's reputation now?
Well, this particular incident, the firings and the admission of editing, has at least put up the very fact that BBC does have a bias. They have said that they don't, but Insight UK found more than 300 incidences of bias, and specifically towards my country, India. So it tends to do this. BBC has a particular narrative that it kind of propels, and as a state broadcaster and as a journalistic entity, that is not acceptable. They tend to look for sensationalization of news bites, whether it's let's talk in case of India, they did a documentary in 2023 on PM Modi, where they tried to project him as the butcher of Gujarat, where it was not. And that's a completely wrong, misinformed ideology that they had made that narrative on. They had done this with the Indian national parks, Jim Corbett Park. They tried to victimize the poachers that were actually harming wild animals. So in case of India specifically, and I'm sure the world in general, BBC tends to sensationalize news, hand out victim cards, and try and twist the narrative in a way that is not favorable to the people who are actually ruling the nation. They tend to do a kind of very shoddy job in being an unbiased reporting platform. So this particular incident with Trump being Trump, has made sure that everybody in the world, when the Indians make a hue and cry, they may not look up at it in the same format as when Trump makes a hue and cry and USA goes after it. So this kind of shows that BBC is not a trusted platform. They make very, very specific top-down errors in how they present content to its viewers, and words of BBC alone are no longer cast in stone as unbiased reporting, factual reporting, or even truth-telling. It has a very, very deep impact on the people that actually listen to it, and for people in India, BBC is no longer a faithful or even trustworthy source of news.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing that insight, Shruti. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump has once again repeated his stand, saying that he knows nothing about Jeffrey Epstein following the release of emails from the disgraced New York financier mentioning the U.S. president's name. Trump has said that he had a very bad relationship with Epstein and pointed towards the likes of former President Bill Clinton and Harvard University President Larry Summers for being closer to Epstein. Posting on Truth Social, Trump has also stated that this is another ploy by the Democrats and to deflect from the government shutdown. He has also said that Attorney General Pam Bondi will be probing the relationship between Epstein and Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and Reid Hoffman, among other important people. Let's listen into what the U.S. president has said.
What did Jeffrey Epstein mean in his emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have announced that a long time ago. It's really, what did he mean when he spent all the time with Bill Clinton, with the president of Harvard, who that is, Summers, Larry Summers, whatever his name is, and all of the other people that he spent time with. Jeffrey Epstein and I had a very bad relationship for many years.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for staying with us. Shruti, now looking at this, what's your analysis on all this Trump connection with Epstein, and how might President Trump's repeated distancing from Jeffrey Epstein, how do you think it is shaping public perception, even though he keeps denying it? And what is the political responsibility and transparency, or that responsibility on U.S. President Donald Trump about this case now?
That's a very keen observation, questions that you've asked us, Asuma. It's something that we need to understand, that Epstein has become a horse that is being whipped by both sides. Trump whipped this horse to win his election. Epstein was the only thing that he was one of the very major things that he had against the Democrats. And now that he's in power, no, there's nothing happening in Epstein files. Redacted files are only released. And the Democrats are now beating this horse, and they're asking for the full disclosure of the files rather than selective disclosure. And they want Trump's connection to be kind of observed. So basically, Trump is probably either misrepresented the Epstein case and its seriousness to the public, and kind of used the bad blood of this incident to smear the Democrats, or he is completely complicit in it and he only wants to use Epstein as a pawn to fix Democrats in place and have his bills pass and all the other things. So either of this narrative doesn't work well for the Republicans. If they have promised the nation that they are going to disclose all the Epstein files, why was it not done? And if that is a major concern of MAGA voters, then he should do it. He should deliver on his promises, because not doing so and just denying things does not look good for him. Now, there are rumors again about Epstein's conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the Democrats are now saying that that lady is being given specific treatment, special treatments in VIP treatments in her jail cell, and Trump may be considering pardoning her. Trump may be commuting her sentence, and a lot of other things. So the main conspirator somehow dies in his jail cell without actually implicating Trump. Just that email where he says that he's the dog that hasn't barked, that means which either means that he has not spilled the beans, or he has not been publicly defamed. Either of those two narratives don't work well for Trump. And the only thing that Trump actually can do now is, without any bias, release all the files and bury this body. Otherwise, it is going to be a skeleton in his closet that is going to be pulled out every time the Democrats have a bone to pick with Trump and its regime or its policies. So the best way for the authorities to deal with it is full disclosure, full transparency, and accountability. Just by selectively targeting Clinton and the others does not show that you are on the side of justice. It shows that you have a political agenda that you want to push forth, and you're using Epstein very, very carefully and very, very selectively to your particular advantage, which is not the truth that you promised the public who voted you in power.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Shruti Dasgupta for always joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that Russians will increasingly be unable to ignore the war as Ukraine's long Neptune missiles proved effective in overnight strikes on Russian territory. He has called the attacks justified responses to a Russian missile barrage on Kyiv that has killed 6 people in an apartment block. Hours later, authorities said a Russian drone strike on a market in southern Ukraine has killed 2 more people. This is what the Ukrainian president has said.
З нашими партнерами, щоб наповнити програму Pearl. Програму, яка дозволяє нам купувати американську зброю. Зокрема, це системи протиповітряної оборони, ракети до них. Особливо важливо в цій програмі ракети для патріотів. Ми готуємо угоду із Грецією по енергетиці, щоб максимально розширити варіанти постачання газу в Україну на цю зиму і в стратегічній перспективі. Домовленості з різними країнами Європи від Норвегії до Греції, щоб у нашої держави були гарантії забезпечення газом. Я дякую всім партнерам, які нам допомагають. І були сьогодні дуже важливі обговорення з нашими військовими, нашої ракетної програми, її рівня. Довгі Нептуни показали себе сьогодні у далекобійних санкціях проти Росії. Ми щомісяця досягаємо більших результатів з ракетами. Я дякую всім виробникам, дуже вдячний за це, нашим воїнам.
Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Sudhakarji, for joining us again. Good to see you. Sudhakarji, now Major General, looking at this, Ukraine's use of long-range Neptune military, does it change things in any way does it change the dynamics between these two countries, and what political implication could arise if Ukraine increasingly justifies its cross-border attacks as proportional responses to Russian strikes on civilians?
Good morning, Asoma. Thank you for getting me for your show.
Thank you.
The short answer to your question is yes, it does have a very significant impact. You see, longer the range of weapon systems or the projectiles or the missiles or the drones, larger will be the distance or the depth areas of Russia which are going to be targeted by the kinetic component of Kyiv or Ukraine. Now, if you look back to when the war started, way back in 2022 until now, the conflict has gone through several milestones. Levels of upgradation have taken place based on the distance or the range of a weapon system from say 20 kilometers to 40 to 60 kilometers and 60 to 120, and likewise it has been getting upgraded. Now talking about Neptune, there is no denying the fact what he is claiming, and this unfortunately will lead to escalation of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. At such a time, the criticality is, although is related to the weapon systems and the range, but the criticality is going to be at its worst profile by virtue of the climatic condition, the weather condition. It's almost peak of winter. If these kind of ranged weapons are going to be used by Kyiv, it is not going to give any kind of comfort to Russia. They will not remain silent. They will also retort back. In the recent past, sometime in October, if I respect my memory, Russia also has carried out that nuclear-powered cruise missile, which is called as Burevestnik, traveling almost a distance of 14,000 kilometers and hitting the target. Burevestnik is a nuclear-powered cruise missile which perhaps became a trigger for Donald Trump to give orders to Pentagon to commence the process of the testing of nuclear weapons. Similarly, it was followed by another weapon system called as Poseidon. Poseidon is nothing but these are underwater drones. It's like a torpedo which seeks out the targets and destroys. Not many countries in the world have got this capability. So it will be only escalating the range, one. Number two, it will also be escalating on the matrix of the hypersonic, and also be mindful of the fact that there is a weapon system called as Orenshik. Orenshik is a hypersonic traveling at a speed of almost about 10 to 11 Mach. 1 Mach is speed of sound, 11 Mach you can multiply. No radar in the world held by any country can detect the flight or carry out neutralization of this weapon system. They have been deployed in Belarus. So it is unfortunately heading towards a militarization and intensification of the weapon platforms, which ultimately will be dangerous and not in favor of Kyiv. Therefore, it would be better that Zelensky, rather than hyping up the issue, takes a very considered view. You see, tit for tat is applicable up to a level, but beyond that, it is proven beyond doubt that the weapon platform capability in the military industry of Russia is far, far ahead, 5 to 8 times more than that of all the Western alliances countries put together. Back to you, Som.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Major General Sudhakarji for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, viewers, we move on to India. At least 9 people were killed and 31 others injured in a devastating explosion at a police station in Naugam near Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir on Friday night in India. The explosions occurred after confiscated explosives, including ammonium nitrate stored at the station, detonated. Most of those killed were policemen and forensic team officials who had been examining the materials, which had recently been brought from Faridabad, Haryana. The blast comes just days after another deadly explosion in the capital. A car bomb detonated near the Red Fort in New Delhi, killing 13 people and injuring more than 20 others. Now we welcome back retired Major General Sudhakarji for this discussion as Senior Geopolitical and Strategic Defense Expert. Thank you, Major General, for staying with us. Now, looking at both these blasts, can we say that these 2 recent attacks have shown cracks in Indian state-to-state information sharing? If so, how should India reassess explosive storage protocols and interstate coordination? What do you think?
Okay, the first one is about the cracks in the intelligence surveillance network, and second one is about the interstate coordination. Let me tackle the first one first.
Yes.
Coming to Delhi blast, well, I would say rather than condemning the intelligence network and their capability, I personally feel, since I am a student of geopolitics, joining the dots quite passionately, and I am the one who wrote an article on 31st of May, immediately after Asim Munir was promoted to the honorary rank of Field Marshal, forecasting that a thing like this is in the offing. Pakistan is not going to sit quiet. They are planning for a black swan event. And let me tell you, since I am in touch with major people who are into the int work and all, and I know how they function because I myself used to handle the things while in service.
Yes.
Our intelligence network under NIA is to be complemented.
Yes.
India was heading for a much more disastrous kind of a serial blast in number of cities. A rough count which I have made was actually indicating 18, but yesterday I think in the newspaper said they were planning for serial blast in 6 cities, comprising of more than 4 states. So therefore, to prevent such a kind of a disaster actually has demanded a very, very exacting kind of a schedule, very tight kind of a schedule by the int work. They have been proactive. They have moved from lead to another lead and successfully managed to bust the thing much before the serial blast could take place. So Delhi blast, I would compliment, in my opinion, that they have actually busted the gang before they could go in for the final kill. One. Number two, coming to the blast in Srinagar at Naugam, I have served there for a long time and I know what has happened. I also understand the complications of handling explosives. My take on the whole issue is that it is to be treated as an accident. It is not an int failure. While dealing with explosives, it has happened when I was in service, a mishandling of a small little fuse or a detonator or casual handling by somebody. We may be calling it casual. There is nothing like casual when you are handling such kind of things, sensitive issues. They are extra careful. There are occasions wherein they just blow up without any external pressure. It is purely by some kind of a unknown or unscientific cause. It has led in the past to some kind of a explosion which could not be substantiated and explained in the past. It has happened in my presence. I have seen it in my own eyes. and also it has led to many fatalities. So therefore, at the moment, we should rest our assessment purely on the account of accident until new dimensions throw up. Now, coming to the interstate coordination which you are talking of, India, after the National Intelligence Agency came into existence, I think it came into being in 2017 or 18, thereafter, all multiple intelligence agencies have been brought under one umbrella. They continue to operate with a new standing operating procedure. There is a finer coordination about the monitoring.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution to establish an independent fact-finding mission into mass killings in Al-Fashar, Sudan, aimed at identifying perpetrators, including the Rapid Support Forces, with the text passed without a vote, signaling broad international support. UN Rights Chief Volker Turk has condemned the cruelty in Darfur, Sudan, and urged immediate global action, while the UK said the UN's independent fact-finding mission will preserve evidence for future justice as the RSF continues to deny targeting civilians amid reports of high civilian casualties. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan has announced an inquiry into the election-related killings that occurred after she won 98% of the October 29th vote amid allegations of rigging and internet blackout and claims by opposition groups that hundreds were killed by security forces, as international condemnation grows, including from US senators. Mali's media regulator has suspended French broadcasters after accusing them of airing unverified claims and falsehoods about an al-Qaeda-linked fuel blockade. The suspension follows escalating fuel shortages caused by the JNIM group's blockade of key highways since September, which has led to a worsening security situation across Mali. Africa CDC warns the continent is facing its worst cholera outbreak in 25 years, with over 300,000 cases and more than 7,000 deaths, a 30% surge driven by weak water systems and conflicts, while infections are declining in Congo, South Sudan, and Somalia. Jordan's King Abdullah and Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has reaffirmed support for Syria and Lebanon's security, stability, and territorial integrity from their bilateral talks in Singapore. They've also called for compliance with Gaza ceasefire agreement and a two-stage solution. South Africa has allowed 153 Palestinians to disembark as the Department of Home Affairs cleared their entry after a local humanitarian group guaranteed accommodation, and the Border Management Authority confirmed that they could be processed under South Africa's 90-day visa-exempt travel policy for Palestinians. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says that U.S. President Donald Trump recognizes the need to negotiate with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, despite their differences. This comes as a meeting between Trump and Putin in Budapest was cancelled earlier. Now we start with UN Security on Sudan. The UN Security Council has voted in favor of renewing the peacekeeping mission in Abyei, a disputed territory between Sudan and South Sudan. The UNSC has renewed the mission for another year, warning, however, that further extensions would depend on the tangible progress. The resolution has been drafted by the United States and is adopted with 12 votes in favor and 3 abstentions from Russia, China, and Pakistan. It extends the mandate of the United Nations Interim Security Force for ABA until November 15, 2026. The mandate includes some 4,000 military and police personnel tasked primarily with protecting civilians in the oil-rich border area where clashes are frequent. Let's in fact listen into what some diplomats in the Security Council have shared.
While reiterating our serious concerns regarding the unrealistic benchmarks that could question the future renewal of UNISFA's mandate, the A3+ voted in favor of this draft resolution, solely to ensure the mission's preservation, as its presence and role are more essential than ever in the current context in Abyei.
Согласование текста США вносили в него лишь косметические правки, никак не меняющие главный посыл документа – увязку судьбы ВСБА с выполнением правительствами Судана и Южного Судана контрольных показателей по урегулированию окончательного статуса Абьея. Не увидели серьезных изменений и после состоявшихся вчера дискуссий по тексту, когда была угроза, что резолюция вообще не будет принята.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Charles Sinkala. He's an international relations expert, joins us live from Johannesburg. Thank you very much, Dr. Sinkala, for joining us again. Welcome to News6 World. Now looking at this, how effective has the UN peacekeeping mission in Abyei has been in reducing violence and protecting civilians? How might the continued presence of UN forces in Abyei affect negotiation dynamics between Khartoum and Juba?
Well, they have been trying for quite some time. I think when the United Nations General Council and the United Nations itself was formed 78 years ago, they've been trying to provide military support to war-torn nations such as Sudan and Southern Sudan. But more of that has to be done, in terms of protecting the lives that are faced within the intersection of these criminal activities. But of course, to some extent, others have got a view that I also share, that the militarizing of nations such as Sudan